Welcome to the reading of And Then There Was None by Agatha Christie, also published as 10 Little Indians. Chapter 1, Section 8. Mr. Bloor was in the slow train from Plymouth. There was only one other person in his carriage, an elderly seafaring gentleman with a bleary eye. At the present moment he had dropped off to sleep. Mr. Bloor was writing carefully in a little notebook. "That's the lot," he muttered to himself. "Emily Brent, Vera Clathorne, Dr. Armstrong, Anthony Marston, old Justice Wargrave, Philip Lombard, General MacArthur, CMG, DSO, manservant, and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers." He closed the notebook and put it back in his pocket. He glanced over at the corner and the slumbering man. "Had one over the 8th, diagnosed Mr. Bloor accurately. He went over things carefully and conscientiously in his mind. "Job ought to be easy enough," he ruminated. "Don't see how I can slip up on it. Hope I look all right." He stood up and scrutinized himself anxiously in the glass. The face reflected there was a slightly military cast, with a mustache. There was very little expression in it. The eyes were gray and set rather close together. "Might be a major," said Mr. Bloor. "No, I forgot. There's that old military gent. He spot me at once." "South Africa," said Mr. Bloor. "That's my line. None of these people have anything to do with South Africa. And I've just been reading that travel folder so I can talk about it all right." Fortunately, there were all sorts and types of colonials. As a man of means from South Africa, Mr. Bloor felt that he could enter into any society unchallenged. Indian Island. He remembered Indian Island as a boy. Smelly sort of rock covered with gulls, stood about a mile from the coast. It got its name from its resemblance to a man's head, an American Indian profile. Funny idea to go and build a house on it. Awful in bad weather. But millionaires were full of whims. The old man in the corner woke up and said, "You can't never tell at sea, never." Mr. Bloor said soothingly, "That's right, you can't." The old man hiccuped twice and said plaintively, "There's a squall coming." Mr. Bloor said, No, mate, it's a lovely day." The old man said angrily, "There's a squall ahead. I can smell it." "Maybe you're right," said Mr. Bloor pacifically. The train stopped at the station and the old fellow rose unsteadily. "This where I get out." He fumbled with the window. Mr. Bloor helped him. The old man stood in the doorway. He raised a solemn hand and blinked his bleary eyes. "Watch and pray," he said. "Watch and pray. The day of judgment is at hand." He collapsed through the doorway onto the platform. From a recumbent position, he looked up at Mr. Bloor and said with immense dignity, "I'm talking to you, young man. The day of judgment is very close at hand." Subsiding on his seat, Mr. Bloor thought to himself, "He's nearer to the day of judgment than I am." But there, as it happens, he was wrong.